Hello, we are going to make a code review today. We are going to review together the C# code of a WPF desktop application, which is in fact this desktop app that you see. We will review together how the code is organized. The desktop application is not a complicated project. The idea behind this discussion is that we will see how the decisions are made, how the software architecture is made, and different things that the novice software developer might not understand. So we will see together how to do this. This conversation will be a little long. We will discuss about different things to make a very broad view on the project, from the functionality to the code until to the release. So everything. We will first see how to install the clock because it is already available on download. We will then together make a functionality review. We will then look at more how the software is made, how the software architecture is done, which is not so complicated. We will discuss about what is a binding, how we can make some styling also on the desktop app. You will see that it is configurable by the user, not only on the code. And also we'll see a technique to make inter-process communication with pipes to send commands and to receive commands so that we can control the desktop app via a remote process on the local machine. And then we will see also together how we can make an automatic release. Before we dig too much in the technical subject, I will shortly present myself. I am Thierry Bremard, Senior Software Engineer, working since more than 10 years in C#. I have started to program in C in 2000. I have been graduated in 2008 in a telecommunication engineer school in France. I made different internships. I started to work as a C developer for 2 years. Then I started to work as a C# developer in 2011. I joined a consulting firm which is called Margot Group in 2015 when I made different consulting missions in C# in different consumers like Société Générale, Natixis, Engie, which are most of them in the financial industry. Then in 2020, I moved from France to Germany, and I am working in the technical test team of GfK. Because I have a big knowledge and big experience in C# development, I am in the phase where I like to think about my knowledge, to how it has been acquired, and start to give the hand to the people who are learning. The fact also to explain things, give also better understanding on how things are organized, and is also a methodology to improve the technical skills. To download the XoClock, which is in fact here, I go on Google, I type XoClock, GitHub, and I should go on the repository, my repository, Thierry Bremard. There is XoClock here, and here there is a list of release. So you can download the source code by cloning the Git repo, and if you want, use directly the binary, you can download here the zip file. I'm going to download, I open the zip file, I'll extract it. There is a bin folder, and here there is a XoClock the clock binary, which is loading, and now I have a clock. So this was the first thing I wanted to show you, how to install it. And now we are going to make a functionality review. In the binary, there is also this text file, which is a userguide.txt, which comes with it, which explains different things. So first, there is two modes for the clock. There is the mode clock and there is the mode chronometer. If I double click, I can switch between the clock and the chronometer mode. So let's look how this is done. So there is my clock that I can move. If I double click, now I am in chronometer. If I double click again, clock. It's like this. Just by double click, I'm switching the mode. Style. To change color and background image, open with the editor style.json. So let's look at this. So here I have a JSON file which I can open with a Notepad++. And here there is some different properties that the user can use to change some things. And here, for example, there is a background image. Background image says in background image folder, the image 29 is taken. So if I'm going here, the image 29 is taken, and this is this blue thing which is there. But suppose I want to change by this red here, which is named 13. I will type 13 here. 13. I'm going to save this, and I will just have to type F5 on the clock, and then the image is taken in account. Let's continue. Let's continue to look at the instruction manual. Very nicely written in text. Shift left moves the clock to the left border of the screen. So let's look at this. Shift left. In fact, this is not the left. The screen is divided in 3 parts. There is a middle, there is a left, there is a middle, and there is a right. So shift left, in fact, move one. So this is not totally correct. It should be updated. 1/3 of the screen on thing. So shift right, move to the other part. Shift top, same thing. So let's look. Shift top, down, top, down, right, tack, tack. Okay. So I can move it like this. Okay, so the screen is divided in 3 parts from right to left, but only 2 parts from bottom to right. I just want to little subtlety. You see the corner here. If I move to there, the corner is now totally rectangular, and I can move. You see the corner which moves like this. The corner just switch to adapt to the screen when it is in the corner. Control C. Control C in chronometer mode, copy current value to the clipboard. So let's look. I'm going to chronometer mode. I start the chronometer. If I press Control C, I'm going there. I'm going there. I have 2 minutes 8. Now 2 seconds 8. Now I press Control C. Like this, 11:39. And you can look, there is the border here. When I press Control C, it will react. You see the little flash red? It means that he understood that a command has been processed. Control C, in clock mode, there is CD. So let's go back to the clock mode. If I press CD, I will copy the date to the clipboard. So let's look. I'm going to past, Control V, I have the date. Now continue, C, T. If I press Control C, T, I should have the time because it is written here. Copy the time to the clipboard. Let's look at this, Control V, I have the time. Good. Let's continue. Space in chronometer mode, start, stop, reset chronometer. So let's look. I'm going to the chronometer mode. I press a space, I start, space, I stop, space, reset. This is like this. Okay, good, we understood. B, bold format size for the time. So let's look at this. If I want to B. So you see, I have made a lot of fun by writing this software with all the functionality which has been done. This simple clock has some nice features which are not obvious. So D, show hide the date. D. I show the date, I hide the date like this. Okay, good. R, resize mode, no resize mode. So here you see I have the clock and I cannot resize it. If I press R, there is this little thing which appears and I can resize it. So I have a beautiful clock here that I can move like this also, which is quite nice. And I can resize it how I want, for example, like this. Good. Then T, topmost, true, false. So here, if I click, for example, on another window, the clock remains at the top. This is a property in Windows. This is called topmost. If I press on T, which will be acknowledged by the border which is highlighted temporarily, then it is not anymore in topmost. And if I click on the window, the clock is hidden. And I can fetch it again via this like this, and I can put again topmost to true via this. Good. Then X, I'm going to exit the program. So if I press X, the program is finished, and I'm going to restart it. Bin, tac, XOClock. It is there. Border is green because here I have put green. F1 maximize. So if I going to press F1 here, I have the full screen, the clock in full screen. F2 normal, F3 minimize, F5 refresh the style loaded from style.json. Plus in the keyboard, increase the opacity, minus decrease the opacity. So if I'm going to press on the keyboard minus, I'm going to decrease, plus increase. Mouse. If I put the wheel, I can set the opacity with the wheel. So I'm going to scroll with the wheel, like this, and I change opacity. If I double click, I switch the mode between clock and chrono. Within this, left button press, drag window, and change location. This is what I'm doing when I'm doing this. Good. So what is interesting also is that the XOClock can be controlled by a second instance with a command line. So start the first XOClock process, open a command line prompt, and execute the following commands. XOClock C mode chrono. So let's look at what this will do. So I am going to go in the bin directory here, like this, D, tac, and let's look at what the functionality says. XOClock mode chrono. I'm going to start this, and I hide the date. It is now in mode chrono. Then I'm going to say I want to start the chrono. So I say I want to start the chrono. And this is an independent process. So the process of XOClock here is making some operation in the system, and the other process, XOClock here, receives the notification to start the chronometer. If I want to stop the chrono, I'm going to say I want to stop the chrono, and the chrono is stopped. I can also reset the chrono, reset chrono. Okay, done. So you understood, huh? And I can kill the remote clock also via command kill. and then the clock disappeared. So now we have made an exhaustion review of the functionality, and now that you have a good view of what the clock is doing, and it is not only showing some clock you saw, we are now going to see together how the code is organized. So it is organized, it is written in C#. This is a desktop WPF application with some bindings and some specific handling to handle the key of the keyboard. There is no specific difficulty about writing this software. The main idea is more to understand how the software is organized and how things are done in a professional way, I would say. So we have done download demo full feature. Let's look at the class diagram now. So I have created a class diagram here to show you the interaction of the different classes, but I can do this in the same time. I will show how the code is organized. So in the start, so here you see two projects. One project is a library to make the inter-process communication. We will see this at the very end. The main project of the clock is in this single project. And the startup file of this desktop app is the app.xaml file. The app.xaml file says that we should load the window with the content of the main view XAML. And the main view XAML here is here. You see a different style, and because the clock is started with another style JSON file, what you see in this screen now is not exactly the same styling as what you see during the execution because of this. The content of the XAML here is different than the content of the JSON file, which is loaded as a startup. So we have the main view here. This is a view. The view is the main window, the desktop application window. You have the XAML file here, and so there is a rendering on the upper left, upper top, in the top part of the screen, on the XAML on the bottom, and you can switch from XAML to design like this, or you can hide one part, and if you want to only view at the XAML, you can click here and switch between design and XAML like this, and come back to the first view like this. Good. So the XAML view is there, and it is with some C# also in the background. And you have here the main view, which is started. And what is important is once the view is loaded, this method is triggered and is setting something inside what is called the data context. And it is putting a model which has been instantiated here. And the window loaded method is triggered because in the XAML I have the handling the loaded is defined here. The loaded event is triggered when the window is loaded, and it is indicated here that this method should be executed once the window will be loaded. So one more time, when the window will be loaded, it will trigger this method, which will set the data context to the model, which is a timer model, which has been injected a timer core. Let's look again at the class diagram. So here we have the main view that we have seen here with the XAML. The arrow here with the open end arrow means that there is a reference from this class to this class. And the name that says appearing on the arrow says the name of the reference. So here we see by looking only at the diagram that this class has a field which is named model, which is a reference to a timer model class. This timer model class is implementing the eNotify property change interface. And this timer model class has a reference which is named timer core, which has a reference to a class which is implementing the eTimer core interface. So what do we see here? I rename slightly the MVVM. MVVM means there is a view, there is a model view, and there is a model. Me, I prefer to rephrase, to change a little the nomenclature. I prefer to say there is a view. The view has a reference to a model, which is implicitly a model of the view. So it means that the model has some properties which should be linked to the view. So for example, the content of the time will be in a specific property and the view will be linked to this property. So by convention, my model is the image of the view. And the model moves and updates its data via a core. And here this is the core. So the view should have no logic, no business logic. It has a reference to a timer model. So let's collapse all the things. Because the view is showing some data, the time and the date, it should obtain this data from a model. And the model exposes a display date and a display time. If I double click on display date, there is this property which has been created. If I want to get the content of the display date, I'm going to return the content of the display date, which is defined as a string, private string. And if I want to, if a component sets the content of the display date, and if it is different than the current value, the content is updated and an event is triggered. Same thing for the display time. So we have two properties which appear here, display date and display time. And each of them, if we look at how they are implemented, when the value is changing, which is shown here, then I'm triggering the onPropertyChange method, which will invoke the event propertyChanged by giving some event args, which are in fact the name of the property which has changed. And this is property, the way to invoke this event. This is in fact coming from the eNotify property changed interface. So we see that this timer model is implementing the eNotify property changed interface, which is in fact shown here by this little lollipop. And if I go to the definition of this, this means that my class should expose an event which is called property change event, which should be called property changed, which is there. Okay. let's check in the runtime how this property change is used. So I'm going to start the program and we'll try to see. So here you see that the property change has been invoked. Why? And it is null. Just we can recap before this. Why? How the code is working. So here we see that the callback has been triggered. That the tick has been triggered in the call stack. Then the set date, then the on property change has been triggered. But this is another. So let's focus on the property change event. So you see, at the startup, the property change is null. So I can add a watch. Add watch here, and we see that the property change is null. So for the moment, no one is aware. In fact, I have put a breakpoint on the onPropertyChanged method. So each time I press F5, you see it is null. So I will remove the breakpoint and then put it again once everything is loaded. So now the window has been loaded. I can put again the breakpoint, and the breakpoint is triggered again because this method is executed every second. Here we see the property change event, which has been filled up, and we see the target field. The target is, or the method field here is displaying who has registered. And we should see, you see here, full name, property change event manager, full name system component model property change event manager. This means what? This means that the fact that our model implements notify property change, we have registered it inside the data context. Windows itself understands it and register its own handler, and you see it here. Property change event manager. So it's important also to understand how the things are being updated. This is because when you are inspecting the property change event, you can expand it and you see who has registered to it. So this is what I wanted to show about this event. Let's now look also how the pure functionality is done technically. So how the events coming from the core are updated in the time. So to do this, let's just see again the class diagram, understand how the mechanics are done. So we are the main view. The main view is instantiating a model. The model is using an instance of an object which is implementing the eTimer core. And in the eTimer core, we have some events, which is tick, which is this one. So we have the tick event handler. And the tick event handler is a delegate which implements the signature of an event like this one, and is having as a parameter the tick event args. So in fact, we are using an object which broadcasts a tick event handler, and the tick event handler is, so let's look at the implementation of eTimer core. eTimer core is in fact implemented by the timer core. We can see this on the class diagram by showing show derived interfaces. No, show add. we cannot show collapse. We cannot show the implementation, which is okay. So, but if I go here, eTimer core, I'm going to add it on the class diagram, drag and drop here, and so we see that the eTimer core is implementing the timer core interface, which is there. So the class diagram of Microsoft is not perfect. I would prefer to have a direct line here to here, but that's like this. Okay. So the timer core is exposing the event handler tick, and the user of this timer core should register to the tick. So in fact, the main window is being notified through an event. Little subtlety, tick event handler. In fact, there is a little issue here. The event, yes, we are declaring an event like this. We could say that this tick event handler should so here we see a little issue. The delegate might not be needed because we are tick event args. Tick event args is implementing the event args, which is a convention for an event. Tick event args. And what we could do is that, in fact, this should be renamed to event handler. Event handler. Event handler is a generic type which has an input with a type. And the event handler has a type which should be used, defined, the tick event args. So the tick event args, so this means that we have a tick type which gives the event args. The event handler here should take as input the generic type event args. So this should be replaced by this. And here we are using the generic event handler, which already defines the delegate. So in fact, here, by making a code review, I am just seeing that I have defined here a delegate which should not be used, the delegate tick event handler, and in fact use this event handler to avoid having to define a new delegate type. So there is patterns. So you know all the design patterns, but there is also an event pattern. The event pattern is of different rules at different levels. So we should have defined the parameter of the events. The parameter of the events, by definition, by convention, are implementing the event args class. So here we have the tick event args. Then we should have the event itself. The event itself should be of type event handler with the type tick event args. And by convention, this event handler should return nothing, because if there are several subscribers, it is not possible to return any value. For example, if I return a bool, how do you manage to understand what is the return value of which handler? It's not possible, so that's why the event handler is returning a void. Then we have the first parameter of the sender, and then the type of the parameter which brings the data of the event. This is part of the design pattern. The eTimer core interface here defines this event handler, and inside the event pattern, we should define, let's look if this is correctly done, tick, 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 my timer callback. So, here we have we are defining two. So inside of the timer core, I'm using the pure timer that I could use directly also. The thing is, my timer callback is triggering the tick event. By convention, in fact, here there is a little issue in the code. We should define this tick event args. We are triggering the tick. So this should be renamed by convention to on tick. On tick. And on tick is responsible to create the tick event args and passing it to the event handler tick. Yes, so this is the way the event pattern should be defined. I can just build, rebuild, and rerun like this. I can remove my breakpoint. Okay, we see it is still working. So let's again put a little breakpoint to check what is doing the call stack. The call stack we see at the root of the call stack at the bottom, we have the onTick event. So the onTick has been triggered by the timer callback, okay, and we are calling the tick event handler. Then timer model tick, which is timer model tick is defined here, and it is saying here I am updating the property display time, and I set the property because the value is different. I trigger the onProperty change, which is then handled, you see here, by the Windows handler. OnProperty changed method name property change event manager. Okay. I could push the pattern to say that this thing here, which is called timer model underscore tick, it could be named like this, like in the Windows WinForm model, but I could also say this is a tick event handler in the name of the method or event. Usually, you see here Windows use property change event manager. I could rename this as tick event manager if I want to be coherent with the name which is declared here. The idea behind this is that in the code, in the professional level, each time we have a specific setup or pattern, we should name here the same name convention. This is one of the key also of the experience on technical knowledge. By convention, when I expose an event, I should always process the same methodology. So the timer core here you see there was a design flow. Now I can remove it. I'm sure it will work. The event, the name of the event is given, and it should be of the type event handler as a generic, taking as input a specific type, which is the name suffixed by event arg, which is implementing the event arg property. Then this event should be triggered by a method which is called on, then the name of the event, and in this method I should create the type of the event args, then trigger the tick things. These things might pose some issue with some parallelism. I will not speak about this because in my own project there is no multi-threading, so I do not have to have a thread-safe way to call an event. Just be aware that this might be a little problematic for multi-threading, because this might be not null, and when this is invoked, this can be potentially be again null if another thread is accessing it. Not in my case. Good. So let's continue the discussion. Let's continue the discussion on things. So we have seen UML diagram, MVVM, binding, core events for time. We have seen this, keyboard handling on views. So what we have seen for the moment inside the code is how I am updating the date. So the date is updated via the timer core object, which in the pure core is using a Windows timer. You see it here. If I go to the definition, I am in the system threading timer, not the WinForm timer, a threading timer. And this timer core here is triggering the event that we see here. The event tick is then here taken via the timer model tick, and the timer model tick is triggering the property change. And if I want, let's look at something. Timer tick, display time. Yes, look something. So here, look, I have on property change method, which is defined here. So you have the same construction of the on method, which is triggering an event. Look, on property changed, you creating an object property change event args, which is triggering the property changed event. On this construction here is exactly the same than the inside the timer core. We have the on method, which is creating an object event args like this. On method is constructing an object event args, and the event name is triggering an invoke with this and e. And in fact, if I want to be coherent, the invoke here should be named e, because by convention it is called e. Because here, if I go here, tick invoke, event handler. Here we have object sender, event e. And if I go to my timer model, the property changed definition should also be with the same prototype. Object sender, event args e. This is with little technical subtlety that we can differentiate an expert code to a novice code. The novice will maybe try to trigger the event, catch the event, make the handler of the event. It works, okay, good, without any convention in the styling in the code. Here you see that all the parameters are following some rules, and you also see that I made some mistake, because you have to have a fresh mind about this, and you do not create events often. So for the moment, we have seen that how the time was updated on the window. But we didn't see at all how the processes of all the functionality on the keyboard when I move the window from left to right, etc., where it is done. So let's look a little at the code, how the code is organized. We have chrono status here, the clock mode, timer core, motion generator. We see this later start chrono command. Style configuration, tick event arcs, timer core, timer model, the clock command, the mouse. There is nothing here. So here we are in the view, in the code behind of the view, main view. Main view loaded. I'm loading the style, I position on the top right corner at the startup. I'm filling the data context. Then I start the command server thread and I start the blinking. And where are my functionality to handle the keyboard? My functionality to handle the keyboard is done. Let's be a little clever. I'm going to the XAML file here, and there should be some events which are defined. So here we see mouse click, key down, key up. So here all these things are events handler, and key down is defining the callback which should be triggered each time I'm going to press a key. So key down, then I have my key here. If there is an arrow, I'm making some special stuff. Then I log the key down and I switch the key. And depending on what is the key, I'm going to do something. For example, if I want to show the date or hide the dates, there is a D. And here you see, if I am in copy mode, then the date textual, I copy it to the clipboard and I set it to the keyboard and I flash the border. What I want to show you here is that there is a big part of the code which is in the code behind of the view, main view XAML. It is not inside the timer model because it is totally independent, and this is typical functionality of the view. In other words, some business code which is handling the timer is inside the timer model or in the timer core, and some specific code which is directly focusing the UI is still in the code behind of the main view XAML file. So we have seen the keyboard handling on the view. Nlog logger, I will just tell you that most all my code in all the projects always use the nlog logger. The nlog logger, I like to use it because until it is in my mind simple to configure. You have some targets. I define different targets here and some rules. The idea is that, for example, let's look at the target debug. And here I am defining that I want to write to the target. So here I can put a filter which is filtering a class. I do not do this, I put a star. So all the class should track for all the log verbosity to the specific target output. So here I have the console, which is in fact not useful. There is a debug on the debug file, and if I execute my program, this way of declaring the nlog makes me the possibility to track in the real time in the output debug window of Visual Studio exactly what is happening. So if I move here, for example, I am debugging moving to position. I can say I want to cd copy the date. I have a breakpoint here, like this, and you see the debug output is moving. Control up, Control C, flash border, mouse leave. And all this thing is displayed because I invoke the logger, and the logger is used here. Log error or log debug. In the same time that it is available on the output window, I have a subfolder which is called logs, and the logs output are also dumped in this log file. This is very important to troubleshoot, to have a log file, because there still can be some errors and you can want to review this later. And this is defined inside the nlog config file in the debug file section, where here I specify the maximum archive files to be 10. Little subtlety, if you know nlog, I am using the logs process name, and the process name is a variable defined by nlog, which enable you to have the name of the log file, which is the same process. So you can copy this configuration, and if you have several processes, you will have the distinction between the name of the log file automatically without doing anything. Little thing also, as a developer, you should automate your process, and I will show it to you. I have some snippets. So if I am going to write dbg like debug, like this, I put twice tab, then my log debug is already filled in. I can show you this here. So here, and I have two snippets. I have the dbg, like this, or I have also the error, err, like this, tab, and log error. Good. And also I have a snippet to define the logger entity here. If I write, so let's suppose I do not have it instantiated, I'm going to type log, tab, and then the line is already pre-populated. This is important because the code snippets are enhancing your productivity, and every time you saw the design pattern I show you with the event handler, I have also the same design pattern for the loggers. Every class has an instant private static field, which is named _log, and I am using the debug and etc. So the Visual Studio snippets are very useful to this. And if I go to whatever class, let's look at the motion generator, for example. Here there is no logger, but suppose that I want to put some log, I'm going to create it like this, log, and here I'm going to dbg, and I'm already ready. This is a log, like this. Okay. So you see a little more clearly what I mean in the beginning when I was saying that the clock is a little simple tool, but there is a lot of things to speak about only on this project. Let's see nlogger. So we have field this, property changed field, we have seen this, bg image styling. Let's look fast how I have done this thing about the styling which is changed at the startup. So I have my XAML file which is defined here, and with some properties in the window. So I define explicitly different elements like a text block here, which is named text state, a text block with some text block effects inside the border here with background effect, etc. So here I am modifying, I am making some configuration inside the XAML file that you see here, which when it has been compiled cannot be changed anymore by the user, because after the process of building compilation, this file is not available for the user. So to do this, to put the styling at the end of the user, so that the user can control it, I have implemented a style library which can be found at the startup of the program, and we see it there. So Windows loaded, then I'm loading the style, and the load style method is populating a style field, which is defined as a style config, and the style config here is exposing all the properties that I want to change. So there is a font color, text drop shadow color, background image, etc., which are an imitation, a way to give the user the way to control the properties which are defined in the XAML file. And I am using these different properties of this style config object inside my code behind here. And if we look at the style, it is instantiated at the startup via this factory method, which in fact is only loading a style.json file default, which is named style.json. And once this factory method, which is returning a style config object here, and you see that the factory method is a static load, static is a static public method. It is giving these objects, and then at different places of the code, I am going to update. So here you see the text is filled, and I'm going directly to update the properties of the XAML object. The text time effect, for example, the text time here is in fact the text block, which is defined in the XAML file, which is defined here, text time here. So the name text time is available as an object, as a reference of an object in the code behind. So all these properties, which I am exposing in a specific object that I have decided to create, I handle them, and style background image, for example, you see if the file does exist, I'm going to create a URI source, on the URI source my border background, and here I am updating the background of my border. And same logic, if I'm going to my border definition, this is defined in the code behind as a border thing, and if I want to check in the XAML, I should see that I have a border here which is named my border. So this is the way that the styling is handled, and I have created my own style.json file which define exactly what the user can define after the build to update the styling. This is one of the key of my superb clock system, is that the user can define everything he wants in the styling. Now that we have seen the background image styling, let's look a little how the pipe client server is implemented. So one feature I have specifically designed, let's show it again, is that in my folder, output folder, I can go there, cd tac like this, d tac like this, and I'm going to make some command lines to control the clock. For example, I can go, let's go to the user guide, and I am going to say I want the mode chrono. So I want to set the clock C mode chrono. So the clock is now in chronometer. Now I am going to say I want to start the chrono. The clock is starting the chronometer. Then the clock is going to stop the chrono like this. So how does it do this? How? So technically, this is a process which is speaking to another process. And this is done via pipes. And here you can see, in fact, in the execution, in the background, and you see here the added value of logging in the output debug, what is doing. So, file is started, program is started, pipe, the clock pipe is open, you can control via command line. And let's look at what it has said. Rx command. So I have received the command mode chrono by user tbrem. Pipe, the clock is open. Tac, 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 tac. Receive command start chrono. Then receive command stop chrono. So we are here inside the process and we are receiving some commands. And this is done via inter-process communication, which are named pipe. So let's look first at the consumer, how the consumer is handled. So I'm going to open the startup file, which is the XAML. Let's look at the code behind of the app XAML. And here I am saying, in the case of when I have three input arguments on the command line, if the argument number 2 is with C, then I'm going to execute the command like this, and I'm going to execute like this. And I say I convert the command to uppercase, the remote instance connects and send command. And let's look at the connect method. The connect method is using a named pipe client stream, which is defined in the system.io pipes namespace. And here once I have a pipe client, I say I want to connect to it. Then I create a stream string, which is saved in the instance of the class. Then I am going to send a command, and the command is sent on the stream, like this. So this is the way the consumer is sending some data. So technically, when I am doing this C stop chrono, I am writing to a pipe this stop chrono message. And then the host clock is using, so if I have input 3 parameters, I shut down. I send the command, then I shut down. If there is no parameter, I default to the normal process of displaying the XAML window. And in the XAML window code behind, I am starting a command server thread. And the command server thread is creating a thread which is going to listen to the server listen, server command dispatcher, and I handle the client. So here I have a command dispatcher class which has been created. And the command dispatcher class give the user to listen to a specific name server pipe. And you see, by the way, that I am using a constant, which is used by the server on the client code. If I look at the references, I have here a constant which should be which is used in two places. This is very important to use some constant here. So here I have some command dispatcher. This is the server side, and the consumer is using here connect with the same name, constant. So my server is listening, and then if I want to handle the client, I am waiting for a connection, and the connection is here, there, and my pipe, my string, I write a string to say who I am as a server, then I read the string, I receive a command, I explain here, I dump in the debug that I received a command, then I am triggering the on command received. And you see here again the same pattern of events handling. On command received is triggering the command received event handler by creating my object command received event args. So once again, on here, if I go to the command received event args, this is again implementing the event args, inheriting from the event args class. So always the same pattern for the event triggering. On command received is called, and is invoking the command received event by giving the instance of this object and creating the command received event args. The command received here is defined as an event handler, taking as the input type parameter the command received event args. Now that we have seen all the technical code of the clock, there is still some code. There is some code on the pipeline, because you should be aware now that, so little subtlety. We, as a developer, should have software skills, and there is a lot of things to know and to automate. And one of the key skills is also to write some automatic tests. In this project, I did not write any automatic tests because the project is quite simple, and so this is, you can debate about this, if I should have done this or not. Me personally, I didn't wanted to write an automatic test. This does not mean I never write automatic tests. Just in this project, in this context, with the risk which is behind, I have estimated myself that I should not write any automatic tests. And you see that a lot of logic also is in the view itself, and it is hard to make some automatic tests on the view, except by extracting and putting some more work on the extraction, which is, for me, not useful for this project. Besides automatic tests, so what I want to speak about is automatic test is a part of CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD is for continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous deployment. And in my GitHub page, you will see that I have some release which should be available, and I do not have any internet anymore. Yes, internet. Connected, good. So let's look at my GitHub with my repository, Xoclock. Here you have some releases. To create a release, you can do it manually by going on release page and then this. Me, what I want is every time I am going to push my source code, I want to create automatically a zip file with the content of the binary which are here, open file, here, and here I have my binary, which is compiled by the server. So the continuous deployment is the fact to automate the fact that the binary is downloadable by the consumer. To do this, GitHub has a feature which is called Actions, and you can program it via a file which is called a YAML file, which is in fact here in the GitHub workflow up, and here I can open in Notepad. So this YAML file is defining, this is like source code, but for the automatic build pipeline. And you can configure it and add some steps to create a release file. So let's look at it. Without taking too much time, I will go fast on this because you can go on YAML documentation elsewhere. So let's look from top to end and understand what it is doing. Name .NET Core Desktop. So this is a name. I want to trigger this job on each push of the branch master. So if I create another branch and I push, this job will not be triggered. And if I create a pull request, also this will be triggered. So this is a list of jobs I want to first build with a strategy like this. I want to run the following command of line which are below on the latest version of Windows, and I define some parameters which are used inside the scripts below. First step, I want to check out. So I am using a checkout action by default, and it knows alone that as I am on a specific repository where the source code is to be fetched. Once I have checkout, I want to install .NET Core. So for this, I am going to use actions, which is in fact an internal repository where there is a lot of actions available. And I'm going to use this version of the .NET framework. Then I want to set a version number, and this will use PowerShell, and to execute the version number, I am going to execute this PowerShell script that I have defined here, which is using the getDate, format the date, year, month, day. I am creating a PowerShell script here. The idea that you should understand is that this write-host is using a convention inside GitHub, which is setting a variable, set output name version number, and this syntax will allow you to create a variable version number, which is used inside the steps after. So here I am creating a version number variable used inside the workflow by putting it inside this version number, which is, in fact, if I go here, you will see in the release, which is there. So here I am putting in this variable this version 2022-04-19. Then I want to check outputs. Oh yes, this is just to debug. I just echo the output version number. Then I am going to unit test something, but because there is no unit test in the code, it will not execute any unit test, but it is prepared to do it. If I add some more, then I'm going to .NET publish my SLN file with the configuration release inside the bin output directory. Then I zip all this thing with zip action, which is available on the GitLab platform. I give the file name xoclock with the version number, which has been set just above, and suffixed by the zip extension file. Then I'm going to create the release. To do this, I am going to use action GitHub. I am speaking about GitLab, but in fact we are using GitHub, which is an independent platform of GitLab. GitLab and GitHub are different. I want to create the release with this tag name, this create a new tag. Then I'm going to upload the release. I upload the release asset, and here you see the different file name which are created. So here let's look at a demonstration how it is triggered. I have some action. I'm going to push some code live so that we check that it is triggered. So class diagram, I can commit this. E-timer core, I am committing the different modification that we have seen with the timer things. On to do, okay, done, correct, event and link, notation, good. I'm going to commit on push. And because I am pushing on the master branch, let's look if something happens. We should see soon. So here I have done nothing on my computer. On the target website is seeing automatically that something, a job is waiting. Since now, I'm going to click on this. We have to wait that a target agent becomes available. Build, so it is already building, set up the job. So now it is starting to execute the workflow. And this thing is just very powerful. So it's installing live the .NET Core. And in fact, all this automation to reinstall .NET Core, to rebuild, etc., ensure that you are always, you can build it on every machine, Windows machine. To have reproducibility. In fact, this is to avoid having some specific stuff on your local computer, forget it, give it to a friend, and then your friend do not build. The fact that we are building here on the GitHub automated platform. Executing unit test, it has been done. I am publishing now and creating a zip file, create the release, and as we are the date of today, we are the 25 April, we should have a new release which is available of the 25 April that we see here. So I hope you have enjoyed this nice, very long technical video. Write me what you think about this clock first. Would you like to install it? Did you already install it on your computer? You can also propose me some plugins with some image and some styling, for example. Write me down in the comments of this channel, of this video, what do you think about the technical details I give you. If you are interested that I review your code, you can also push me some comments, some GitHub repository, and we can look at it if you want, if you are interested in C#. And yes, write me in the comments what you have seen, what you have thought about this video. And goodbye, cheers.